just past the curve at Anchor Beach where the flagpole is. It's a stretch of beautiful homes in Beach Avenue in the Woodmont section. And Mervyn purchased the property some 2 years ago. Currently on site, as David has on the screen, there's a 2,800 square foot home that was built in 1925. It's 5 bedrooms, 5-bedroom colonial, has a detached garage to the rear of the property. So at first my client was going to just do a major renovation of the house, and then he decided, once he got cost estimates for construction, what the heck, let me take it down. So he's going to start from scratch, demolish the existing house, build a new house, some 3,700 square feet. I've presented to you tonight an application with a site plan that was prepared by Ron Wassmer of Connecticut Civil Group. The architectural plans were prepared by Peter Cooper, who is a very high-end architect from Greenwich. As you'll see in a second, we start going through the floor plans and the elevations. This is going to be a beautiful house. It's going to be a real statement house, and my clients are really anxious to get going with this. So we appeared before the Zoning Board of Appeals about 6 months ago because the property has two front yards. The property fronts on Blackwall Street to the rear and Beach Avenue to the front. So we did have variance applications for the built-in pool that was going to be constructed to have the pool a little closer to the rear property line, along with the structure that was going to house the pool filter and whatnot. The ZBA felt that there wasn't a hardship. They felt redesigned the plans, moved the pool closer to Beach Avenue slightly, bring the pool filter equipment out of the setback area. So my client did do that. So these were revised after the application of the ZBA. The plans have now been reviewed by both Steve Harris and David to be zoning compliant. So if we scroll to the proposed building, David. So the proposal is to build a new house on site. It's going to be some 3,700 square feet. As I said, it's going to have a front porch, a rear porch. It's going to have a built-in pool. The detached garage that's on site is just going to be renovated. That's not going to be removed, but the house itself will be removed. The plans, the elevations are now on the screen. You can see where there's going to be a wraparound porch with a sort of gazebo-style roof on the westerly end of the front porch. There's going to be a porch to the rear as well, and then, as I said, the pool will be in the area on the westerly side of the house. Plans have been reviewed by Greg Podlusky, our city engineer. You have his report. He had absolutely no engineering concerns about the plans as presented. The property is located in the AE zone, so that the first floor elevation will be at 14.5 feet, which meets the requirements of that zone. And David's summary also has reviewed the building height. It is in compliance with our zoning regulations, as well as the dormers. There were some changes to the office review of dormers on roof lines. There was an amendment to the plan to conform with the current requirements that the Office of Permitting Land Use has on dormers, and those plans were revised and reviewed. And again, David's summary will speak for itself. So that's it. It's a pretty straightforward application to you tonight, and as I said, this is going to be a statement house on the shorefront in Woodmont, and my client is really anxious to get going and moving from Greenwich to Milford. So happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Good evening, Attorney Lynch.
Hi, Bob.
In reference to Greg Podlusky's letter, it's page 19 of the record. He recommends three items. One is corrections of the clerical errors in the coastal area management. If there's any damage to curbs, sidewalks, they're going to be repaired and replaced in the roadway surfaces.
Right.
I'm assuming that you would agree if that was proposed as a condition.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Any of the conditions that were mentioned in the city engineer's report can be made a condition. The anticipation, when Greg reviews these things, he usually will say that sidewalks have to be installed or an apron has to be installed. His comment there is reflective of the fact that those are now existing, so that if either of them are damaged during the course of construction, he would want them to be replaced.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, David, would you like to tell us what you think?
The application is for construction of a new single-family dwelling of approximately 30 feet in height and an in-ground pool. The existing dwelling is to be demolished. The location of the existing two-car garage is to remain, and it is shown to be expanded. No adverse impacts to coastal resources are anticipated with the proposed work.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, I'd hear a motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is regarding 128 Beach Avenue. I move to approve with the following conditions. The following conditions are contained in the city engineer's letter dated April 30th of 2024, page 19 of the record, but one is clerical errors are being taken care of in a coastal area management application. Existing curbs, sidewalks, and driveway aprons are damaged during construction will be repaired, and patches and roadway surface and any will be needed to be repaired in the engineering department. This is the petition of Thomas Lynch, Esquire, for the coastal site plan review to construct a single-family dwelling on map 60, block 743, parcel 11 of which Mervyn Klein is the owner.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
John, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Sue, if you would please call the roll.
Mr. Agnes,
With the motion.
Mr. Alling,
With the motion.
Mr. Anderson,
I'm with the motion.
Mr. Hirsch,
With the motion.
Mr. Collegian, Mr. Macchio,
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer,
With the motion.
Mr. Sadi,
With the motion.
Mr. Zaharides,
With the motion.
and Chairman Quish.
I'm also with the motion. Good luck. It's a beautiful looking house from those elevations. It's a nice addition to the Milford storefront. Next order of business is 0 William Street, Zone LI. Approval pursuant to CGS Section 824 by Kevin Crusading Esquire for partial discontinuation of 0 William Street on map 32, block 336, parcel 1, map 32, block 337, parcel 1, and map 32, block 337, parcel 3. The applicant has the floor.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission and staff. For the record, my name is Kevin Crusading, the law firm of Crusading & Moore, 3 Lafayette Street here in Milford. With me this evening is Dan Thornburg. He's the principal of the LLC and the owner of the property. Dan's been before you in the past for some other projects in the past few years. So what this application is, the board's probably familiar with the 8-24 process. Dan is asking that this portion of, shown on the map there, and then I had also just hand sketched some highlighted sections of the GIS to show you the portion of William Street that we're asking to be discontinued. Dan's asking for that as one of the adjacent property owners owning 0 William Street. The William Street right now is a majority residential, the part that's improved, and you approach that from a different road, not Rowe Street. I can't remember the name of the road off the top of my head, but you approach it from the other side of the property. This property abuts Rowe Avenue, and then if you had an opportunity to drive by the property, it would look like it's just a field or a dirt road going in. So with Dan purchasing 0 William Street and asking for the road to be discontinued, we're looking to get that cleaned up. And when a road gets discontinued, unless the title search says otherwise, but I don't think it does in this case, half of the roadbed goes to it goes to the abutting property owners. So right down the middle of the road. So the road would be divided between Dan's parcel and then the other two adjoining property owners, which are at the bottom of the screen as you're looking at it right now. So the city engineer has looked at this application. He had some comments about city easements. What we're asking your board and then ultimately the Board of Aldermen to approve is you're giving up the city's right-of-way. The city doesn't technically own the land. The city has a right-of-way across it as a public way. And one of the benefits, if you had an opportunity to drive down there, is some property owner, one of those three property owners, could improve William Street as it exists right now. They'd have to follow the city's standards and put sidewalks and make the road, 30 feet wide or whatever the city engineer or public works would require. And that would open up the road from Row Ave all the way down through the industrial or limited industrial portion of William Street through the residential portion of William Street. By discontinuing the roadbed, the Planning and Zoning Board, especially when Dan comes back in for a site plan application, can put restrictions that there's no access from this property or from the discontinued portion of William Street to the residential portion of William Street. So that's one benefit. One of the other benefits is the fact that right now that 50-foot wide and however long it is strip of road, that's the site right there that David's highlighting for you. The 50-foot wide strip of road that we're asking to be discontinued is not on the city tax rolls. So by discontinuing it, the fee simple interest goes to the abutting property owners, and then that real estate gets back on the tax rolls, and then if there's any buildings or anything that would ultimately be built on that discontinuance would also be on the tax rolls. So this is the first step of our process. Some members of the board who've been on the board for a few years, you might remember that this board approved a previous 8-24 for a different user. I believe that was AAA. That went to the Board of Aldermen and then never got acted on. So eventually Dan's going to come back in with a site plan for what he wants to do with the site, which right now I believe is for one of his businesses. And pending your questions, that's our presentation.
Great, thank you very much. Does anyone have questions for the applicant? Mr. Sadi?
Thank you. Through the chair to Attorney Crusade, thank you very much. The question I was going to ask you answered. We thought we dealt with this one time before, so you've talked about that. The picture that we have that came with the materials shows apparently undeveloped property that is owned by your client. Is that correct? Looks like it's woodlands is what it looks like.
Well, that would be a mixture of my client's property plus the existing paper road.
Okay. And again, going back a number of years, but I think the road was never really used, but there's still easements for sewer and water. And you agreed that if that's a condition of the approval, that your client and you would agree with that?
Correct. There's and the city engineer raised those same points, Mr. Sadi, in his letter. There would be a sewer easement, there's a city right to drain, and he mentioned, the other potential utility easements. So there'd be a 20-foot wide easement. When a road gets discontinued, you notify the utility companies, and if there's already utilities in the ground, like water or electrical, you'll work with their easement departments and give them easements, because now it's private property, it's not a city right-of-way anymore. But that would all be included as part of this process.
Thank you very much, Attorney Crusade. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Are there any other questions or comments, Mr. Anderson?
Really don't have a question. I just wanted to point out that when there was the earlier 8-24, I was a member of the Board of Aldermen at the time. It did pass planning and zoning, but was not taken up by the alderman because another site was found. It is a unique parcel, given the fact that it's bordered by businesses, by hotels, and by residents. It is incumbent upon Mr. Thornburg to communicate with especially the residents in the area about what your intentions are, because there's some sensitivity there, given what the last application was. Thank you. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, John?
Yeah, good evening, Attorney Mercedes. So
Good
we're
evening.
talking, this parcel A, this is your client's parcel, that's his property,
Correct.
and the 50 feet is paper road of William, and that basically goes out to Munson Street, is that the next street over, it goes?
It continues to the corner of Finch Street and William Street, if you're looking at the screen on the left. And then to the right, it's Rowe Avenue, which
Right.
that's the road right before the 95 southbound on-ramp.
Right, and railroad tracks before that. So there's no entrance from Rowe Ave? It's, and there's,
Well, the only entrance right now is from Rowe Ave. It looks like it's like a carved out dirt road that trucks or ATVs go over or something. Looks like the kids could use it for an ATV track in there right now.
just an area that's not wooded, in other words, just a lot.
Correct. Yeah, it's just, so if, for example, this was not approved here or not approved by the Board of Aldermen as far as the 8-24, Dan would have a right to put a driveway over the road area. He just wouldn't have to improve it to be a full width road. Yeah.
Right. And you said the property would be divided among the residents that border?
Correct. It would be divided amongst parcels A, B, and I don't know if that's C over there. That's by statute, and so that's the recognition that so what most likely happened is when this was subdivided originally, the land and the streets, the street was dedicated to the city as part of the subdivision approval application. And so, but the city receives it as a right-of-way. They don't receive it as fee simple owners of it. And so when something's decided to be discontinued per this process, the ownership reverts back to the abutting property owners. However, so as no parcel is landlocked for utility or access purposes, every abutting property owner has a right to pass or repass over that discontinued road.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation.
Any further questions or comments? David?
I have no report for this because I gave it 3, 4, or 5 years ago when AAA was looking at this site. From a land use perspective, the change in tenant doesn't really change the 824, which you've already approved. It's only here before you tonight because there was a request from the Board of Aldermen to have you look at it again because instead of AAA going there, it's Mr. Thornburg's proposed project.
Great, thank you. And if I could, just out of curiosity, what is the business that you're going to use that site for?
Just state your name and address.
My name is Dan Thornburg, 48 2nd Ave in Stratford. So the site would be used for mainly extra parking for my landscaping company, Total Lawn Care and more. We've been a Milford-based business now for almost 15 years. We've got about 20 employees, and so this would just allow us to have additional parking, and it would additionally allow me to potentially put a building a little bit closer to that sewer easement.
Great, thank you. I would, Robert?
Mr. Chair, I just have a question for Mr. Sulkus. In Greg Podleski's letter and report indicates 3 conditions. Do those have to be mentioned if the motion is made to accept this 824 referral?
Because this is an 824, which is the disposition of the city getting rid of it, you can, but these conditions are going to end up popping up again for the site plan. But since this does involve the other 2 properties, yeah, you can make it a condition. That's fine.
Okay, any further questions or comments? I would then hear a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is regarding 0 William Street. I move to approve with the following modifications that are found on page 6 of the record, page 2 of the city engineer's report dated 4/29/24. An easement to be retained by the city for storm damage, drainage. An easement is retained by the city for sanitary sewers. A similar easement should be prepared for the benefit of public utilities as they presently exist, if any.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Mr. Anderson? Thank you. Any questions or comments or discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Sue, if you would call the roll.
Mr. Agnes?
With the motion.
Mr. Allen?
With the motion.
Mr. Anderson?
With the motion.
Mr. Hirsch?
With the motion.
Mr. Macchio?
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer?
With the motion.
Chairman Quish?
I'm with the motion.
And Mr. Sadi?
With the motion, and Mr. Zaharides is down there.
And Mark Zaharides.
With the motion.
All right.
Okay, motion passes. Good luck with your project.
This isn't printed right. This one is though.
All right, next order of business is a public hearing to close by June 11th and vote by July 16th. It's 325 Subway, 300 and 336 Subway, Zone OD, petition of Kevin Crusading Esquire for amendment to special permit with site plan review to use off-street parking on map 41, block 303, parcel AD through G, 2 and 2U, of which 305 Subway Drive LLC is the owner. Applicant has the floor.
Good evening. For the record, Kevin Crusading Moore, 3 Lafayette Street here in Milford. With me this evening is Mr. Bob Cinto, Mr. Robert Cinto, Mr. Roger Borman from Wusthof, and Pat Rose from Rose Tizo, the project architect. This application is an amendment to the site plan and special permit based on section 5.1.9 of your regulations, which allows if properties are within 200 feet of each other and under the same ownership, the board can make a finding that it is impractical to meet the parking requirement on one lot and therefore approve the parking on a different lot. So in this particular case, the warehouse that's located at what's now a consolidated lot of 325 Subway, which is the same site that the original Subway office building was located. The application is slightly changed or requires this modification because although there's no changes to our site plan at 325 and there's no changes proposed across the street presently, there's the 2 office buildings with the parking across the street at I think 300 and 336 Subway. What has changed is there is more office space that is going to be utilized at the 325 building, and therefore that triggers an increased parking requirement. And the site at 325 cannot handle the increased parking requirement. So the request is that some of those cars, if necessary, be allowed to park across the street. And if the board deems that this is appropriate and that we meet the requirements of the site plan and special permit, what would happen is that we would something would be recorded, whether it was a form that David Sulkus wanted recorded or the city attorney's office on the land records memorializing the fact that parking for 300 and 336 includes parking for 325. And as part of this process, and I think David Sulkus mentioned it in his administrative summary, we have to analyze and make sure we have sufficient parking for 300 and 336 as well. I think we have an extra 117 spaces or something, even with this change in parking across the street. So the fire department's looked at this since there was no changes to the site or the of the building. They're deferring their comments to look at a building permit, and that would be based on the building code for the office and warehouse space. The Sewer Commission has relooked at this, and it's the same approval because the gallonages has not increased. The Milford Police Department Traffic Sergeant Jay Kraniak looked at it. He recommended approval to the Milford Police Commission, and I think today we received an email from Sergeant Kraniak letting, I think that Chief Mello had signed the recommended approval by the Milford Police Department. I don't know if there's any other sign-offs that Mr. Sulkus had sent it to, but we've received all of those different approvals. So pending your questions, we'd ask for you to consider this and approve it.
Thank you. David?
The applicant is seeking to use parking across the street on a property they own in accordance with section 5.1.9. This is because there's an increase in office space proposed in the warehouse building due to a new proposed tenant that would require more parking spaces than can be placed on site at 325. See the detailed statement of use dated for 10/24. All properties would remain zoning compliant. If approved, no properties would be rendered non-conforming with regard to required parking amounts being provided.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Go ahead, John.
Yeah, there's going to be more office space, but the footprint of the building hasn't changed. I just want to be clear, those offices are inside the warehouse?
That's correct. It's the internal layout of that same building footprint that's changing, not the exterior.
Okay, thank you.
Brian?
Attorney Kersaden, would this be stipulated designated employee parking?
We haven't had that discussion. I'm not sure how they would want their operations to run, but I can ask that of my client or the tenant.
Mr. Cinto, those don't work very well. This is much better. Yeah, thank you. Go over next to Attorney Kersadian. We're microphone challenged here.
Roger Borman, 45 Quaker Ridge Road, Bethel, Connecticut. And, sorry, sir, can you please repeat the question?
Yeah, good evening. I'm wondering if the parking is stipulated designated employee parking.
It will be employee only across the street, but it's not going to, we didn't plan to stipulate, but it certainly is something that we could do if it's deemed necessary for it. Our footprint for employees are expected to be quite light compared to the number of spaces there.
Mr. Hirsch.
Yeah, you gave me your name and your address, but what is your relation to 305 Subway Drive LLC?
What is my relation to it? So I work for Woodstoff USA, and I'm the chief of staff for the company.
Okay, but you're not affiliated with 305 Subway Drive LLC, is that correct?
That is correct.
So you're not the applicant, you are the tenant?
That is correct.
Or the proposed tenant, because nothing's built right now, correct?
Correct.
All right. Getting back to the question that Mr. Anderson asked, the parking on this parcel where the warehouse will be,
Yes.
you're saying that as a proposed tenant, that the current parking situation on that parcel is not sufficient for your needs for your employees?
We're not saying that the parking is not sufficient for the needs of the employees. I think because the parking regulations don't consider remote work or hybrid work and things of that nature. So I've had previous conversations with Mr. Borer, and It's my understanding that they're not going to require the parking across the street. However, the parking simple straight calculation based on the zoning regulations says if you have X square feet of office space, then you need this number of parking spaces. So this is really driven by the zoning regulation. We don't know that there's actually going to be a need for it.
So you're not here seeking a regulation change, you're here seeking an alternative, which is using parking across the street.
We're, right, under that 5.1.9, correct.
How many parking spaces do you need that you're now going to accommodate with the parking across the street?
So according to the regulation, just strictly following that, for 325 subway as approved, we need 175 spaces, meaning currently just as the warehouse space without the increased office space. So 325 subway proposed, we would need, let's see, 220 spaces. And yeah, I want to make sure I'm reading the table correctly. So 325 is 175, 325 subway has 175 spaces approved. In order to meet the regulations for a total of 256 spaces, we require 81 spaces across the street at 300-336 subway per the regulations.
Thank you. Yeah, that's it. That answers the question. And is there a proposed crosswalk?
I think there's an existing crosswalk now.
And could you point that out? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Just to point out too, I think as an aside, both properties previously, they were owned by different entities of Subway headquarters, but they had employees and franchisees parking and walking across the street previously. They just, didn't have this approval for that.
Right, and so down the road, if call it the across the street property, if that is now sold, there will be an easement for that 87 spots.
Correct. There'll be an agreement on the land records that'll be run in perpetuity, be permanent, for the 81 spaces, correct?
81, thanks for the math correction. Okay, is there any other questions or comments from the board? Go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly. So are there sidewalks running the whole length of these two properties?
I'm pretty sure there is, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the crosswalk a raised crosswalk?
No, I think it's painted.
Okay.
But I'm not 100% sure on that, but
Okay.
I drive by there quite frequently and I don't recall the raised part.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And the police department didn't recommend flashing lights or anything during
No, there wasn't any recommendations. It was approved as presented to them.
Okay. I mean, I do understand that there could be less of a need, seeing that people are working remote as a sort of a new change in how we get things done. This is a public hearing, so if anyone from the public would like to speak to this issue, please come to the podium. State your name and address for the record, and please try to keep your comments to about 3 minutes. I think you might need to go over there.
Hi, my name's Diane Pryor, and I live at 5 Audubon Close in Milford. And I'm here to voice my support for the special permit and the site plan amendment, the way it's been submitted. I, along with a group of neighbors, have met with Bob Cinto and with Roger Borman of Woodstock. And I believe that Woodstock will be a very good neighbor to the residents and benefit the city of Milford as a world headquarters. They have verbalized an understanding of our environmental concerns to protect Mondo Ponds Nature Preserve. and the increase in parking does not appear to be a detriment to the preserve with the plans that have been previously submitted by Bob Cinto. We think that I think the natural environment will actually be improved. So I request that the board approve the special permit and the amendment as they've been submitted. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further comment from the audience? Yes, come on up, if you would. Over at the lit microphone. Name and address for the board, please.
My name is Thomas DiMatteo, 5 Audubon Close in Milford. I also speak in favor of this proposal. I, along with my wife and a bunch of other neighbors, this thing is so loud. We met with Mr. Cinto and Mr. Borman and learned a lot of things about the project that really made us feel good about what's coming in, especially relative to what was being originally proposed. So we were concerned, if you remember, from our opposition to the original proposal, we were concerned about traffic, we were concerned about noise, we were concerned about the impact on Mondo Ponds and the neighborhood. And each concern was addressed by Mr. Cinto and Mr. Borman. We were told that there would be approximately 12 or so 18-wheelers a month versus the original proposal was 6 to 12 per day. So that alone reduces noise and impact on the neighborhood. The hours of operation are much shorter. The original proposal was like sun up to sundown. We were told by Mr. Borman that this would be probably 7 to 5, give or take, and no weekends. So that, again, reduces impact. We also talked to Mr. Cinto about reducing the visual impact of the warehouse on the neighborhood and on Mondo Ponds. And he promised to work with the neighborhood as well as the city to make sure that we can come up with some natural screening in the form of trees, types of bushes or whatever works to minimize what was a large warehouse and what you would be seeing from the pond and from the neighborhood. So he offered to meet with us in the future to go over different types of planting plans. And Jeremy Grant from the city was at the meeting, and he also promised to work with everybody to come up with something that was optimal for the site. Finally, Mr. Cinto also offered to paint it any color we want. So hopefully we can come up with a color that, again, blends in with the natural environment. And finally, one of the things we learned is that the height, it'll actually not be as high in certain parts of the building from the original proposal. And again, that just works to minimize the impact on the area. So I speak for myself, but even the other neighbors that were there were very pleased with the conversation, and we support the change. If it results in Wusthof moving into that warehouse, then we certainly support the change.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public? Do you want to address any concerns at this point, Councilor?
No, thank you.
Okay, so we will close the public hearing, and I imagine hot pink is out for the paint color, but we'll see, although it's kind of flashing. Anyway, I would, if there's no questions or comments,
Quick question, through the chair. Attorney Crusaden, I'm wondering about EVs. I know that there are EV stations that are proposed for 305, I think it is. Will there be EV stations also located across the street?
Great question. So there's not as part of this application, but I can speak with my client. I think that because there's no real site plan changes proposed across the street, I think that flew under the radar. But my understanding is the state statute is 20 or 30 more spaces, require a certain number. So, I mean, they're willing to put in additional charging stations across the street. Yeah.
Mr. Sadi.
Thank you. This is a comment I'm very proud to be on the board tonight because I remember it was very contentious the last time we were here. And it's good to see that the citizens are working with the applicants to make Milford a better place. And I'm really proud to say that, glad to see that happening. Wish it would happen more times, but I understand people have their reasons to take their positions. But I really thank the applicant and the citizens that had concerns to come together and speak in favor of this application.
David, would you clarify the EV situation? They need 10%, so if they add 80 spaces, they're going to need 9 more spaces.
No, they're not creating any new spaces. Our regulations and the statute would require, if new spaces were being created, they're just asking for permission to use already existing spaces. So the EVs that they're going to add, based on the approved site plan, that they still have to do. But they are not required by our regulations or statute to add them across the street.
Okay, do you recall what was included in the previous approved application?
I'm doing this from memory. I'm going to say it was 18 chargers. But
Okay, so that was the 10%.
yeah,
That's correct.
Yeah, I mean, they met the requirement on the original site plan
Right.
as approved.
And so would you be willing to equal the 10% for the total numbers of parking EV stations?
For the additional 81 spaces, yeah. I mean, if you wanted to make that a condition of approval, that's not a problem.
Yeah, I mean, you could rent them out, make some money.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
we cannot, it's a nice thought, we cannot require them to do that. Under the latest Sheets decision from the Supreme Court, we cannot condition an approval based on something that's not required by the regulations.
I don't read that same way you do.
I'm just, for the record, I'm just saying it for the record.
I understand. I do not read that same way you do.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
I can verbally amend the application to include that, so you don't have to make it a condition of approval if you want me to do that.
That's fine, and I appreciate that, and I thank you for the, joining with the spirit of trying to save the planet kind of thing. If there's no further questions, we have the public hearing closed. Without further ado, I would hear a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is regarding 325 Subway, additionally 300 and 336 Subway Zone Office District. I move to approve as presented the petition of Kevin Crusaden Esquire for amendment to special permit with site plan review to use off-site parking on map 41, block 303, parcel 8E-8G, 2 and 2U, of which 305 Subway Drive LLC is the owner.
We have a motion, do we have a second? Yep.
I second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, if you would call the roll.
Mr. Agnes,
With the motion.
Mr. Allen,
With the motion.
Mr. Anderson,
With the motion.
Mr. Hirsch,
With the motion.
Mr. Macchio,
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer,
With the motion?
Mr. Sadi,
With the motion.
Mr. Zahardis,
With the motion.
and Chairman Quish.
I'm also with the motion. Good luck with your
Thank you very
project,
much.
and welcome to Milford. We'll give these folks a minute to get their stuff and move on. The next order of business will be old business, and it's an ongoing discussion.
75 Cascade.
Oh, I'm skipping over somebody, excuse me. Mr. Brown. Public hearing, 75 Cascade Boulevard, Zone ID, petition of Nick Brown for special exception to allow temporary public events at map 102, block 807, parcel 6A, of which 75 Cascade LLC is the owner, and the applicant has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, thank you very much for having us here today. So my name is Nick Brown. I work for Athletic Brewing Company, which is the current tenant of 75 Cascade Boulevard. I'm here with authorization from the property owners, 75 Cascade LLC. We recently moved to Milford from our original location that we outgrew as our company continues to expand with our nationwide distribution of non-alcoholic beer. So in 2020, we opened our new facility at 75 Cascade Boulevard. We've been undergoing a number of significant production improvements to the brewing capacity to the point where we hope by the end of the year to be one of the 10 largest craft brewers in the nation. So we're very proud of the work that we've done. We're very proud to be a part of the Milford community. One of the things that we did lose, however, when we moved from our original location in Stratford to our location here in Milford, was that the building was not set up either through permitting or through physical space within the building to allow for a tap room. And as a brewery, there are a number of folks that are fans of the product. They love to be able to consume it. They love to be able to visit the site where it's produced, and whether it's takeaway, whether it's or to enjoy it on site. So we've been looking for some creative solutions because at this point we're focused from a capital and available time constraints in terms of what we're building inside the building. Doesn't really allow us to build a full public tap room at this time. There's a number of considerations where the water main actually comes in right where we'd have that set up. So what we've been trying to figure out in the meantime is a way that we can allow the public, which has been asking us both through emails, social media, and in-person visits to our facility. They happen to show up, like seeing us on Google Maps and other listings, hoping that they're able to participate in either purchasing some of our product to go or to enjoy a pint on site. Considering we've got really nice weather coming up this summer, in the photo that you can see here is an outdoor patio area that serves as a break space for our employees currently. That photo is also included in the little packets that I printed out if you wanted to get a little bit of a closer look at it. There are a number of ADA accessible parking spaces at the front there with a fairly large lot. On Friday, this picture was taken this spring on a Friday afternoon, so it's got a little bit busier as our production has increased, but it tends to be fairly empty. And we're hoping to essentially work as on a temporary event basis to allow the public to come in and enjoy what's effectively a pop-up tap room. As a exclusively non-alcoholic brewery, we tend not to attract the same larger, rowdier crowds that an alcoholic brewery does bring in. Tends to be very family-friendly with a lot of shorter visits where people have the priority on trying a handful of new things and being able to take away some beers that we generally don't offer for sale in retail stores. So we tend not to have our proposal is not necessarily to host a 300-person rager, have everyone parking in the back all over the edges of the parking lot. We want to have a business similar to what we had in our Stratford location, where we tended to get anywhere from about, depending on the weather, 20 to 100 people over the entire weekend. So it's not something that's super busy, but there are people that do make a pilgrimage, so to speak, that have traveled from as far away as California, Colorado, Minnesota, that are all fans of our brand nationally, to be able to visit Milford, Connecticut and see our brewery. So what we're asking for today is a special use permit that would allow us to allow public access to our production facility on a contingent temporary basis that would only be open on certain weekends in warm weather, outdoor only, where we'd be working under a temporary health permit as an event throughout weekends. At least as a starting point, we'd be looking to do something one weekend a month. So that's the general proposal. So
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Robert, do you want to, let's let David go first. David, if you would.
The applicant is seeking a special exception to allow the public use to the existing patio to consume non-alcoholic beverages produced on-site and food provided by food trucks on weekends once a month in accordance with the submitted statement of use. No live bands or loudspeakers for music are to be provided per the statement of use, but the applicant indicates that music at conversational levels will be provided. The applicant should clarify what that means. The applicant should show more where the 10 by 10 tents provided for shade, as mentioned in the statement of use, will be located.
Thank you. And now, Robert?
This first question is through the chair to Mr. Sulkus. statement of use, which is found on page 3 of the record, I think, but talks about 311.2.15. I'm not really that familiar with it, but it seems to indicate that it has to be outdoor dining. Could you explain that a little bit more to us, what that regulation is? Please, Mr. Sulkus.
I'd have to open up the regulation book. But that, if they chose the right section, it should have been by special exception. So again, what we have here is an industrial use in an industrial zone. Because it's industrial use in an industrial zone, and it's having basically a public, they're asking for a public gathering use, that's what the special exception is. And it's to gather and to consume their product and whatever else that they're asking for in their statement of use. I can pull out the regulation if you want me to look up the exact regulation, but in essence, it's a special exception is what they need.
Thank you. And to the presenter, I see your statement of use. One of them talks about outdoor dining, but in your statement of use, you said that food truck vendors are tentative. And why are you saying that they're tentative if you're asking to have outdoor dining?
So this is one of the things that I run into sometimes when I'm doing health applications in various states when we do events. We are a beverage company, so our products are considered food. We plan to serve draft beer, the same as you'd find in a bar, and a lot of the health regulations are similar to that. So the idea of serving a beer and having it outside can be in some ways considered outdoor dining, and I felt like that was the most relevant regulation, particularly in that, as David pointed out in the special use segment, specifically referred to outdoor dining, and I thought that would be the most relevant use case here.
Thank you. And wasn't really that familiar with your address until I looked it up in preparation. But
yes, we are very much on the edge of
most of where you're located is industrial use, and then as you head, I guess it would be east or south, it's mostly foliage, trees, and the like.
Correct. So we are directly adjacent to a number of other industrial businesses, and on the rear side of our property runs the Metro North train line. So there's nothing residential within a direct adjacency. I believe the closest residences are the special wetlands zone that's like slightly down the hill. There's a private community that is, I would say, probably about 1,000 feet away would be the closest residential property. Everything else around us is warehouse, production, and other industrial use.
And again, your presentation was very good, but could you explain, no live bands or loudspeakers, but then you say licensed music to be played only at a conversational level. Would you explain that a little bit more to us, please?
Yes. So again, with the crowd that we typically tend to get, so I guess loudspeaker was a little bit of a subjective term. So we plan not to have concert level loudspeakers or something loud enough that can be heard across the property. We plan to use something similar for playing music, which is a good accompaniment, when you're enjoying a beverage, in the same size you'd find in a private residence, just a portable Bluetooth speaker, something that would play music at a volume that couldn't be heard more than, say, 200-300 feet away at most.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have no further questions.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Oh, there he is.
Just to answer Mr. Saddi's question, the section that was quoted in the application of 311.2.5.15 is actually the section that cites the request for the special exception. And so the special exception in this particular case is, they want to be able to serve the public at the site, but that's the special exception.
So David, you did have additional concerns about where the tents would be sited.
It's not as much a concern as it is an inquiry based on the statement of use. They're saying that they're going to be providing 10 by 10 tents for shade and in case there's bad weather, but we don't have a site plan from them showing exactly where they are going, and we should have that.
But they're not permanent structures, so that they could take it up and put it up and take it down in a weekend. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So David, if you'd be so kind as to pull that photo up again. Essentially, if you can imagine any street fair where they would have those little 10 by 10 like canvas tents that pop up, we'd be setting it up and breaking it down every single day.
And that's on that concrete area where the tables are?
Correct. Towards the bottom of the photograph there is where we would plan to set up like a service center, and just to protect our employees from standing in the sun for 5 to 6 hours on the afternoon, or if there happens to be rain. It's a simple 10 by 10 10 foot by 10 foot pop-up canvas tent that would be broken down every night.
Gotcha.
It's not possible to set them up as a permanent structure.
Great, okay. Any further questions? Mr. Hirsch?
Good evening, how are you?
I'm well, how are you, Mr. Hirsch?
Right now, does your company produce alcoholic beverages?
No, and we have no plans to.
So right now, your company only provides non-alcoholic beverages?
So, yes, we produce non-alcoholic beer and sparkling water.
Okay. Does your building over at 75 Cascade, is there a kitchen inside if you guys wanted to make food?
No, partially because as a non-alcoholic product, we're not necessarily under the laws that an alcoholic brewery would be. We were actually regulated by the FDA as a food production facility, so we would never have plans to open a commercial kitchen within the building just for allergen concerns and other food safety.
So therefore, at these pop-up events, the only food that would be there would be A, something that somebody brought, or B, food produced or provided by one of these food trucks?
Yes, by a licensed, either a licensed food vendor, or if we were to provide sealed snacks that somebody might
All right, so there's three things. You have sealed snacks, which you would provide and charge.
Mm-hmm.
Right, charge for. You're not going to do it for free. You're going to charge for it.
Of course.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Two, these food trucks, proposed food trucks, like you see at Two Roads Brewery.
Correct.
Okay. And then three, if somebody who wants to go to this pop-up tap room event brings from, say, their house. Mm-hmm. Okay. Can people bring their own music to these pop-up events? Can they bring their own speakers? Could they bring an Amazon Alexa?
I mean, if they were to bring something, I'm sure I can't stop them, but I can certainly ask them to not play their music, which is something I would do even at my other tap room. If somebody brought their own music and was playing it too loud, we would absolutely request that they would stop playing it while we have music of our own.
And so there will be no live bands as well?
Correct.
Okay. And it says no open hours after sunset. What exactly does that mean?
So out of respect for the residential community that is down the road, even though we're not immediately abutting it, people tend to be more sensitive to just the noise and the traffic, even though we won't have a significant amount of it, usually in the evenings or after sunset. So we would plan to make sure that our opening hours for this particular use case would be during daylight hours.
Well, you mean closing hours, because once it's sunset, you'd be closing. These pop-up events.
Correct.
Okay.
And because they're outdoors, we plan to do it mostly in the summertime, where the sunset tends to be after 7 p.m. If that moves earlier, if we happen to do it later in the year, we'd be cognizant of daylight savings and the changing time frame to make sure that we're fully closed by the time sun sets.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Brown, I believe you're referring to Ryder Park, are you not? The mobile homes that are at the end of the street?
I'm sorry, I don't know them by name. I'm familiar with the location.
I would just like the record to reflect that there are two residential properties or two residential locations on the street. One is the relocated Ryder Park at the end of the street. The other is Cascade Boulevard Apartments that this board approved several years ago at 117 Cascade Boulevard, which is a complex that was approved under 8-30G. So there are some
Has it been built?
affordable units there.
Has it been built?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was approved, built. It's existent for several years now.
And
so you're at 75. Your next closest residential building is at 117.
Okay, so David, would you concur that that's probably, what would your guess, 1,000 feet?
That's my estimate.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, that apartment building is on the curve. So 75 Cascade is on a fairly steep hill. At the bottom of the hill, there's a curve to the right, and then it curves back to the left. I believe the apartment building's back to the left. I'd estimate about 700 to 1,000 feet at minimum.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd hear a motion. Oh, no, we have a public hearing, is that right? Yes, a public hearing. Anybody wish to speak to this from the public? Seeing none, public hearing is closed, and I'd hear a motion. Mr. Mortimer?
All righty. I move to approve as presented the following petition of Nick Brown for a special exception to allow temporary public events at map 102, block 807, parcel 6A, of which 75 Cascade LLC is the owner.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Sue, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Agnes,
With the motion.
Mr. Alling,
With the motion.
Mr. Anderson,
With the motion.
Mr. Hirsch,
With the motion.
Mr. Collegian, Mr. Machio,
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer,
With the motion.
Mr. Sadi,
With the motion.
Mr. Zahardis,
With the motion.
and Chairman Quish.
I'm also with the motion. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we have old business, an ongoing regulation discussion for affordable housing. It is our open discussion, and we have invited all in from Milford, Rachel Merva, Therese Ecke, Charles Multabano, and Sarah Bromley are invited to speak together as a group or individually. You need to go to the microphones that work over here. David, you do have an email with a link to their PowerPoint as well.
Yeah, we're there.
Which one?
Well, he sent the email there, doesn't he?
And so just as a matter of housekeeping, this is not the same as a public hearing. The public is invited to listen, but only the 4 invited guests will be permitted to speak. But we will have the opportunity for questions from the board and interaction if any board member wants to chime in. So who's going first? And if you would each state your name and address for the record. So again, just to refresh the board, we have had in our old business section discussion about the need for affordable housing and potential avenues to help us achieve our goals. We've had developers and attorneys. We are now having citizens who have spent some time and effort on their own addressing something that they're passionate about. So we're lucky that they have come here with their efforts behind them to give us some insights into what their thoughts are about our current situation and help us with a roadmap forward.
Thank you so much. My name is Rachel Merva. I reside at 90 Dart Hill Road. Yeah, it's very loud. I'm joined tonight by Teresa Eek, Sarah Bromley, and Charlie Montalbano, and we are very pleased to have the opportunity to present to the Planning and Zoning Board tonight. I'd like to thank Jim Quish for organizing this, all of the board members, and personally, I'm in District 1, so shout out to Etan and John. Thank you so much. Let's see. So a little bit of housekeeping. We're gonna, is it not working? Okay. So we're gonna have a PowerPoint playing throughout. Should I lean back? Okay. Okay, so the PowerPoint is just going to be cycling through. That's not related to our comments. It just gives you an idea about the work and the scope of what All In for Milford is doing. So you can just see that as visuals throughout the presentation. The goal tonight is very brief, big picture on who we are, what we can provide, and how we can partner with the Milford Planning and Zoning Board. I do have handouts, but I'm not going to give them to you now, so we get your undivided attention. So I'll give them to David at the end. I have copies for everyone, and they will all be on the website shortly as well, the All In for Milford website. We're going to have an interactive format, so if there's anything that you have a question or concern about, you can just ask, interrupt us. The goal is to have a presentation in 5 parts. And the whole thing will only be 15 to 20 minutes, tops. Everyone's gonna have a different speaking part, okay? So, and what we're gonna do, here's an intro of All In for Milford. That's 1. Number 2, here's what we've learned over the last 3 years. Number 3, here's the top priority that we've identified for work and housing. Number 4, here are some strategies for working together. And then what's next? So, that's the goal that's the format tonight. Again, we won't exceed 15 to 20 minutes unless there's questions and comments, etc. And lastly, just as a point of pride for me and others in All In for Milford, I just wanted to point out that the tools that your board, the Planning and Zoning Board, has approved, which include the Affordable Housing Plan, among others, they show that Milford believes in diverse and affordable housing options and solutions, and that you, as a board, envision Milford as the small city with a big heart. So thank you so much for that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Teresa for the intro to All In. Do you want to turn yours on?
Okay. Is this echoing? Is it too? Should I start over here? My name is Teresa. I'm a very proud member of All In for Milford. And All In for Milford is an alliance. And a lot of times it's sort of like, well, what is an alliance? An alliance is really a group of individuals and people and organizations and groups that get together to work on their common interests. We don't have to agree on everything in order to make our community better for all of us. So that's what All In for Milford is. We are a grassroots alliance. We have over 500 members. We've only been in existence for about 3 years. So we have 500 members, agencies, organizations, not-for-profits, individuals, faith organizations. We also work with other all-ins. There's an all-in for Ansonia, Derby, Seymour, Shelton, Oxford, and more. So we work on regional strategies with all of these groups that are speaking. This is the community voice. All In for Milford has been able to create opportunities for our community to discuss sensitive and difficult topics like housing, food insecurity, transportation, and more. We're conveners. We've held over 200 meetings. I think I've been at 100 of them at least. But we've had over 26 community gatherings. We have a community gathering every month that is open to the public. Free food, come, we discuss topics, and this is sort of where we've grown to be able to reflect our community and find out, what do people care about? What are people most worried about? What keeps them up at night? What are they proud of, and what keeps them up at night about their communities? And one of the biggest issues that we hear over and over and over again in Milford and elsewhere is housing. It constantly comes up. So we really are a voice of our community. Now, just quickly, before I end, this is who we aren't. We are not a social club. We have a good time together, but we are not a social club. We are not exclusionary. It is open to everyone in Milford, including yourselves. We are not partisan. We believe that having as many voices from as many people in our community as possible is the only way forward. Inclusion is the only way forward, and we want as many different voices from as many different people as possible. And we are not developers or even housing experts. We do have experts on tap. We like to say they're not on top, but they are on tap. So we know how to get information. So I'm very proud to be a part of Lawn for Milford, and now I'm going to turn it back over to Rachel.
Any questions so far? Should we keep going?
Yes, please keep going, and I would encourage the board to just, it's very casual, so if you have a question, just speak up. You don't need to go through the chair.
Thank you. Okay, so what have we learned in the past 3 years? As Teresa said, we have heard from countless residents, right, that there is a need for more affordable housing. Not just deeply affordable. Deeply affordable is one category, but also seniors that are overhoused, middle housing. Where's that $300,000 house for a first-time home buyer? Differently abled housing, permanent supportive housing, young adults that are still at home because they can't afford to move out. So we have heard all of this. How have we heard it? Through these gatherings. We have gatherings, we have programs, we do education forums, we invite subject matter experts to come and talk. So it's either online or it's in person, depending on what we decide. And we do research. We reach out for best practices with other towns and communities. Where should we be heading? We have talked to developers. We've talked to lenders and business community members. We hear about the challenges where they need solutions for housing their workers. They're struggling with that. And so we're hearing all of that through these gatherings. We have forums, as I mentioned, last year, and one of the handouts I'll give you is an infographic. Looks better online than printed, it's kind of small. But it's essentially 90 people were at this gathering last fall, and it talked about things like what's important for renters and owners. What can we do differently here? Different types of housing that we haven't looked at before, we haven't seen too much of. Where do we add housing? Where in our city is important? Which programs do we need to add, and any other considerations? So that, it's actually up right now. So that's part of it. So essentially, this is the type of thing. We will share out information. We're kind of learning and getting stories from people and moving that forward. The ADUs was a good example. We worked very collaboratively with the Planning and Zoning Board and the Reg Subcommittee to loosen those regulations with accessory dwelling units in Milford. We're very proud of that collaboration, and that's just one example, and Sarah's going to be talking about that in a little bit, about ways we can collaborate. But advocacy is important, education is important, giving testimony, showing up at hearings. We're constantly inviting our members to come and sit and learn and listen and share your story, share your feedback. And then relationship building. Part of what we've learned over the last 3 years is we do need to get to know people individually. And it helps, and then we hear perspectives and we learn ways that we can navigate housing solutions in our city. So with that, I wanted to introduce Charlie to share kind of our top priority that we're asking about tonight.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you to the board. My name is Charles Montalbano. I live at 30 Revere Place in Milford, and it's a pleasure to be here. There are many aspects to our housing interests within All In for Milford, but tonight, our top priority is the Housing Partnership Committee. This committee was formed in 1990. I know that's before most of you were born, but yet it's here. And it is an important part of what we think we can do in moving ahead with affordable housing here in Milford. The Housing Partnership Committee, what can it do, we might ask? It can make recommendations to the Planning and Zoning Board, suggestions to modify regulations, speak on applications for land use policy,
actively look for affordable sites, and it can become the administrative lead to implement the affordable housing plan, which was passed here in Milford a couple of years ago, which currently doesn't seem to have any owner. Now, this is a sheet, you'll be getting this. It lists the people who can be on the Housing Partnership Committee. So it's an extensive list of folks who can be on it from a wide range of backgrounds and interests. And that committee can help to implement the affordable housing plan. It's sort of like we don't need to seem to reinvent the wheel. We simply need to implement a plan that is already in place. We talked about some examples of what are people suffering through. I won't say I'm suffering, but like my wife and I are overhoused. We'd like to stay in Milford, but it's difficult to find say a ranch house on a small piece of property for a price that makes sense for us to sell our house and move to. So it's things like that. It's a wide range of issues on the housing front. So we're very lucky to have what we think is a very important tool already in place in the Housing Partnership Committee, and we'd really like to see that committee up and running and manned with folk so that we can get the affordable housing plan going.
So Charlie, if you would explain a little bit more about the committee, when was it started, how do people get on it? Is it from the alders that have done it, or from the mayor's office? Tell us a little bit about the origins and the makeup.
The Housing Partnership Committee? Okay, I brought that with me. So it was created back in 1990. It's part of the charter. Appointments and qualifications. The mayor is a member. He then appoints people to that board. I can read you who the people are. What qualifications, I should say, they should have. You're going to get this in your packet. Representatives of Milford Planning and Zoning Board, Inland Wetlands Agency, Housing Authority, and any local community development agency not to exceed 4 in number. Representatives of the local business community, such as local bankers, realtors, developers, not to exceed 2 in number. Representatives of public interest groups, such as housing advocates, members of clergy, members of local civic groups, and representatives of local nonprofit corporations, not to exceed 2 in number, and local urban planning, land use, and housing professionals, not to exceed 2 in number. And it gives you the duties generally, as again, you'll get this.
And is there a sitting committee now with a full membership?
Well, there really is not one that is operating that we know of. It's just
there's some work to be done then.
Yeah.
I'll let you get on with it.
If you can see from there's a bunch of yellow marks that say those positions are vacant.
Okay, I'll pick up on that. Thank you, Charlie. Keep going.
Sure. That was it. Eaton?
Hi, Charlie. How are you?
Good.
So, I want to focus on solutions, okay? The reason why you're here is because I imagine All In for Milford has identified a problem. Is that right?
Sure.
What's the problem?
Well, the problem is not enough housing, affordable housing that some people call it workforce housing.
Yeah.
Housing for low-income families. I'm on the Milford Redevelopment and Housing Partnership. That's public housing. That is truly affordable housing, but it's not available because we have a 5-year waiting list to get to it. So what we need is housing that is affordable and available.
So you're talking we need supply.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I'm watching the slideshow present, and I'm seeing all these options for supply. And I think there's some great ones. Can you or somebody give us what you think are some good ideas amongst the slideshow that you've been presenting?
Yeah, I think this is really just an introductory discussion. I know that there are a myriad of solutions, right? So we are looking actually for next steps from the Planning and Zoning Board about, kind of doing more of a deep dive on a particular type of solution. We just had in our, I think 2 months ago, we had a debrief on co-ops, of the co-op as a model. I think I talked to Jim about that briefly, but basically exploring that. Residents there pay $500 to $700 a month. It's in Waterbury, it's called Brookside, it's part of the slides here, but that's one thing that you can learn about. The all-in people, that there were 50 plus people, 50, 60 people that learned about co-ops that night, 2 months ago.
Well, that's why you're here. Teach us, please.
Yeah.
Tell us about this.
Okay, so this is where I want to just pull it back just a little bit for tonight, just because I want to, we've talked to subject matter experts, we've talked to developers, we've talked to bankers, we have lots of people that we can bring to the discussion. We just have to hone in on the priority. And if you want us to...
Yeah, so again, to Eton, I did want to keep this somewhat brief because I didn't want to burden the board with too much. I wanted just the introduction now, and I think we can get together on a deeper dive. We're not going to get it all done tonight, but those are really good questions, and we're going to try to collectively get to some of those answers, and we'll sort of figure out a way to collaborate.
Absolutely, and I'd like to hear from Ms. Bromley as well. She has some great ideas.
I guess I'm up. Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, thank you again for this conversation tonight. As devastating as our housing crisis is, it sounds a little weird to say, I'm so excited to be here. I'd much rather we didn't have to be here and that we didn't have this housing crisis, but the fact that you've invited us means you see it too. This is a national housing crisis and Milford is not immune to it. And more of our neighbors, we're hearing personal stories, closer and closer to each family and each people, every person we know. So 8 years ago, I started working on food insecurity, thinking, that's something I can make a difference in. And then 3 years ago, we got to working this, and I started seeing the connection, why so many more people were coming to me saying, my neighbors, they just hear that I was doing work in food insecurity, and they say, I need food. And people who'd never needed food before, never needed help before, and you trace it back to where that was coming from all of a sudden, and a lot of it was due to their housing and the lack of safe, secure housing that they could afford and only have to pay 30% of their income for. So, now, 3 years into seeing the connection between food, housing, mental health, everything, I get calls every week from someone I know or a friend of someone I know saying, do you have any leads on housing? And I'm an individual. That's crazy. So I went a little off script there. I'll rein it back in. If you know me, you know, that 5 minutes. Okay, here we go. So we all know too that typically you all only hear from people in this room when they're really angry about something. And I think tonight my main thing that I wanted to say is that All In for Milford honestly wants to be the opposite of that in this room and in wherever we see each other in the community. By knowing each other better, it's our hope that maybe we could collaborate in a way that benefits planning and zoning, everybody here, everybody watching on MGAT, just everyone in Milford. So I'm here. I get the great job to just invite you, to that collaboration. I think there could be any number of ways that looks like, that we figure out. But a first step might be simply for to come to one of our gatherings. We'd like to invite you. They're, as you've heard before, they're every month. They're first Thursday of every month. We have them all over Milford, different spots, different subjects. Not all is about housing. We get the ideas of what does Milford want to talk about? Lots of things, but a lot of it is housing. So if you have any questions about those, we have a website, It's easy to find. We're on Facebook, whether you like Facebook or not. And I want to just start to wrap this up and say, for 20 years, I've lived in Milford for only 20 years, so that's nothing, right? I'm still new here. And I've heard a lot of people make assumptions about what will and won't work in Milford. Like, oh, Milford will never go for that. Well, in my 3 years with this group, so that's 20 years of hearing those assumptions. In 3 years with this group, I've learned that some of those assumptions really might be wrong. And how would we know if all we're hearing are the angry people coming in tens and, 5, 10 people? What if we instead go out and provide spaces where we hear from hundreds of people and listen to them and hear their stories and share our stories face to face? We're finding out that we could really be wrong about some of those assumptions. But that's a lot of work. You all already do so much work as volunteers. Hugely appreciate what you do. There's no way you could do what you already do and go out and talk to hundreds of people every month, right? That's what we're here for. We do that. And we really would like to invite you to come. So, one of the things that surprised us really is when we did 2 months ago that gathering that Rachel was mentioning. We had a board. You'll see if you keep watching. There's this board that was like, what is that? There are all these pieces of paper on a large bulletin board with Post-its all over. We had presentations on different types of housing options. Then we had small table conversations that were whoever just happened to be at your table. You talk about it. We have some questions. And then people at those tables took Post-its and put them on their favorite housing options. And boy, did that surprise me. We're here in Milford, right? Isn't Milford opposed to housing? We found out that no. Our neighbors really were open-minded, had lots of interest in all kinds of different housing options that you'll see on the screen. And Rachel will tell you too, that all these are going to be available on our website. So that was really exciting. I like being wrong. A lot of people don't like being wrong. I like being wrong about that. And on your way out tonight, if you take a look, that was so popular what we did that we adapted it into a smaller version that we're taking on the road. So we had it at Earth Day. We're going to have it at the Fitness Field Day for mental health, because all of these things are connected: food, housing, mental health. So next, I think, is Charlie to take us back to that roadmap forward. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you. So I appreciate, learning more about your organization and how you're active on many fronts to try to improve the outcomes of people and the experience of people living in Milford. And again, the population is aging. We have children that are living home because they can't go out. We have families that would like to stay but can't. And we also have 830G, which seems to be contentious because it changes the dynamic of neighborhoods that were not intended to be changed in that manner. So there's a number of things that we as a board want to address, and we're going to be looking for solutions, and we're going to look to you to help us find some. And I think the next step would be to ask you to pick maybe 3 ideas that, whether it's co-housing or whether it's, whatever, and maybe address that. Yep, well, we'll look at that. We don't have it now to look at it and spend some time on it, but you will provide that to all of us, and we'll look at that, and we'll maybe have you pick a couple of things that you've already done a deep dive on to present to maybe the subcommittee first, and then to have us hone it down to a point where it comes to the whole board. But I appreciate all your time and effort, and I think you're all doing good work, and in many things, whether it's housing or food or raising awareness. And one of the things that I felt important about having tonight was because this is on MGAT, and we have people in the audience that are stakeholders, and that as we start raising awareness, solutions will find the spot. You know, the universe hates a vacuum. So I appreciate all your time, and if anyone would like to ask questions from the board, or if you'd like to close with a statement, you're welcome to a couple more minutes. John.
Yeah, welcome all in coming today. I just anecdotally, well, we've looked at a lot of options already for affordable housing, mixed use, and one of the things that we've done is the ADUs. And I'm wondering if anecdotally, any kind of conversations that you've mentioned, you talk about ideas amongst yourselves. I'm wondering how that's been received, if there's been any real effect yet.
Honestly, I think it's really great what we've done so far. I think we need to look at detached also. To have an attached ADU is 6 figures. It's not cheap, and unfortunately, if you get a grant, and there are grants available for that, depending on how you might qualify. But we do need to continue that conversation also. We did a campaign with postcards, getting them out there to people that had ADUs and just letting them know about the new regulations, and limited feedback, because I think it is cost prohibitive still. That's one thing. If you have an existing garage and you have the space like a Fonzie type of situation above, that's perhaps cheaper to build instead of an attached ADU. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Ethan.
Yeah, hi. For any of you, as part of your organization and your internal discussions, have you come up with, say, a priority list of which housing options you think would recommend more than another, or would seek to have us really take a look at?
I think it's all of the above. I mean, the fact is, you look at one solution that works for a certain population, it doesn't work for another population. So there really is diversity in the needs, and that's what we're hearing. At the infographic slide that you'll see that there are a lot of different ideas, and so that's coming from the people that are showing up every month.
Great. Well, thank you again for being here, and we'll look at that slide, and we'll come back with questions or suggestions on how we continue a collaboration going forward, because I think that we all recognize a need from different focal points, and I think you're right. It's not one solution; it's a dozen. So it's going to take a while, but if we start now. Well, we've already started, so anyway, we're one step closer. Again, thanks again. The next order of business is liaison reports.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. South Central Council of Regional Governments had a meeting in the month of April. There's nothing that impacted Milford. On this Thursday, we're having a meeting, it's our annual meeting, basically, to everybody get together. The point is, I think there's 3 items regarding the city of Milford. One, definitely in my mind, appears to be based on a private applicant. 2, I think may come from the city. I don't know if our regulations subcommittee has seen either of those, but we'll deal with that. And again, for those new members of the board and those that have been around a while, the purpose of the South Central Regional Council of Governments is to determine if a specific issue that comes up has an impact on the water, the air of the whole region. So that's what we deal with. We don't have a position that will say this should be agreed to by any particular planning and zoning board. But our next meeting is Thursday, and I will give you a report probably in 2 weeks after that meeting, if we have a meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Subcommittee reports. David, Do we have a date? We talked about next Wednesday, I believe.
If that's what you like, I think we can do it. For the regulation subcommittee?
Yes.
Okay. That would be Wednesday, the 15th.
Okay, let's put that on the schedule, and it will be a remote meeting. And we do have Brian, who has stepped down. So are you aware of that? Brian Collegian has stepped down from the Regulation Subcommittee?
Well, I am now, so.
Okay, I thought we discussed it.
Yeah, actually.
And who wanted to be on that? Okay, yes, you're on.
Jim, have we had one in a few weeks, or?
What's that?
Have we had one in a while? Or
No.
I feel like we haven't had one in a couple months, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah.
I thought I got kicked off.
You got bounced. No, it's, yeah, we just haven't had it. We were sort of waiting for some of these things to coalesce.
And also, part of that, Mr. Chair, was because we started adding to the agenda these information sessions for the whole board to take it in. That's why we haven't been doing the subcommittees, because so many members have been interested about the topic.
And so we may address other things that are not housing related in the subcommittee, but we may try to act as a filter to help the full board get better info. So then the approval of the minutes for 4/2/24. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Hirsch? You gonna make a motion on the minutes?
I'll make a motion for what?
To approve the minutes.
Oh, I'll approve them, yeah. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second? We have a second. All those in favor? Opposed?
Opposed.
Seeing none, they're
Mr. Sadi
they're
has to
approved.
abstain. I was not present at that meeting.
So we have Chair's report tonight. I'd like to bring up the subject of Sheets versus County of El Dorado, California. This is a U.S. Supreme Court decision that some people feel may truncate our efforts to require affordable housing as part of multifamily. That we haven't really moved on, but we have postulated that we might do that. We had Bob Smith speak to it. He wasn't a super fan of it, but anyway, it's something that other towns have done, and we've considered doing it, and we'll have further discussion on that as a full board. But Etan, I did send you a link. Did you have time to look at it?
I had the case and I marked it up, yes.
Okay, do you feel like you want to speak to it now, or would you like to wait till next meeting and give it some more thought, or what's your gut?
I can do it now. Essentially, the Supreme Court was dealing with a split amongst the states in terms of how far administrative or legislative bodies can go in imposing restrictions on certain land use legislation. Okay? So in this case, this was an administrative decision by a local board as opposed to a legislative body like a state assembly. The question that I had, and I have to read the case more carefully, is whether this decision is limited only to issues revolving around permits and not other administrative type decisions. Because when you read the decision on page 8 of 10 of what John Burcham sent, it says, in sum, there is no basis for affording property rights less protection in the hands of legislators than administrators. Okay? The Takings Clause, which is the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Federal Constitution, which supersedes state law, state legislative law, as well as municipal law for the city of Milford. It says that the Takings Clause applies equally to both, which means that it prohibits legislatures and agencies, we're an agency, alike from imposing unconstitutional conditions on land use permits. So I don't know if this decision is limited only to permits. I haven't really fleshed it out, or whether it applies broader to agency decisions on other matters, where you have a condition that's imposed that is not related, as I'll use the word related loosely, to what is being proposed by an applicant.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
I can get a little more in detail when I read it a second time.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
That was my first question. And then secondly, the decision refers to what they call a taking. So the question is whether the administrative action, not legislative, but administrative action, constitutes a taking under the Fifth Amendment. So I'll give you an example. You remember when the Genesis dealership was being moved to where the Howard Johnson is? As part of granting, if they wanted to, granting the permit, granting a permit application for that property, if we had conditioned the granting on that property on our desire to have cell phone towers on the premises, I believe that would be outlawed by this decision. Okay? Because number one, it involves a taking, which under the Fifth Amendment, so it would constitute a taking under Sheets, and secondly, it's administrative action related to a permit. What you had raised, I think, earlier today, and I think that Mr. Sulkis was against, was, can you remind me?
Well, two things. You can't require an applicant to do something that's not required by the regulations, that's number one. Number two, because you are putting a requirement on, say we had no regulation for that, but we do.
Yeah.
Say we didn't. We cannot put a condition on an applicant without compensation for something that doesn't have a nexus to the land use itself. So all he's doing is asking for, which the applicant has a right to do under our regulations, to park across the street. But by saying, oh, yeah, we'll allow you to park across the street if you put in EV, has nothing to do with the ask under our regulations.
Right, and so the question is whether the denial of their application based on their lack of acceding to our demands constitutes a taking under the Fifth Amendment under the Sheets case. In our situation with the electric vehicles, unlike in the Sheets case had to do with the transfer of a payment of a fee. Here in this situation, we were not dealing with today with Subway with the payment of a fee. Although I'm not sure that matters under this new Sheets decision.
I mean, my reading, and I won't speak for the city attorney, but I talked to the city attorney, is in the scenario that I just gave you, we can't do that. Now, if there, and I'll give you an example of something that will be probably before this board. If a housing complex in the future comes before this board under our current regulations, and the board says, well, that's a great application, but we want to have some affordable housing in it. Under Sheets, that would be a taking if the regulations don't call for that.
Yeah, and that's where I disagree. But
if we have regulations that talk about, like we have for any sort of land use thing, that has certain standards or things that we're looking for that are incorporated in a regulation, that's different.
Understood.
So when this board comes up with new regulations for affordable housing for different zones or whatever it is we can do, that's going to be by regulation, and we're not depending on how it's crafted. We're not creating a situation where we're taking something from them, because they have to have a choice. At least and currently under our current regulations, we have zones that allow affordable housing, and they have a choice to take advantage of it or not.
Understood.
Right, but again, I don't believe the Sheets case and the cases that it relies on is focused solely on the regulations. They also focus on agency decisions, not just the regulations.
Both agency and legislative. That was the key thing here.
Correct.
That was the key thing.
Agreed. The issue that I bring up, however, is in this Sheets case, it came before the Supreme Court because there was a fee that was being charged to, and so in this case, Sheets, there was consideration, there was monetary consideration for, you want to do this, you have to pay a fee. I think now we can all agree you can't do that. The question I have is whether when any particular agency decision or regulation constitutes, as a matter of prima facie matter, constitutes a taking under the Fifth Amendment.
Okay, you know what, I'd like to ask Mr. Sadi to weigh in. We have our two attorneys here.
Thank you. You know, the important thing is that this decision is from the United States Supreme Court. It's binding on all subdivisions below that, so federal courts, state courts. Eitan and David, I think, mentioned, but the guy wants to put up a pre-built house on his extra property for, I think, a child. And they said to do so, you have to spend $23,000. They don't tell you what that house was worth, but let's assume it's worth $40,000. You're saying you have to pay that fee. So the Supreme Court came out and said that that fee is a taking, first time that they really came there. What is important, though, that there were 7 justices that made a decision. One wrote the first part of it that said this is a taking, and it was unlawful to do that in the California case. What I did look at, and it's important to see how the other justices wrote what they call concurring or dissenting opinions. In this case, there were no dissenting, which was disagreeing opinions. And throughout all of the concurring opinions, they said that the facts, which are always important when you listen to these types of decisions, the facts of that case are bound by the facts of that case, and they really don't have a lot of extra value. And specifically in the last page, and this was written by Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Kagan, and Justice Jackson, very clear that we could take certain actions as long as we meet the certain requirements. We don't have to add, at this point, in my view, have to add a new regulation. I disagree on that. But more importantly, it's going to require further action. Now, that being said, I suggest that we really cannot get advice from the city attorney on this matter, because if we do take action and somebody sues us, the city attorney has to represent us. And if he's already given a decision that is contrary to what he's going to be taking later on, we have to be careful of that. Now, I think somewhere there is an ability of us to expend money, certainly in experts. We've done so on many different things, and I suggest that we should consider and look into whether we would have to look into hiring private counsel. The city attorney may not. I don't have an answer to that yet, but it's just something that struck me. But my view of this particular decision is that it doesn't bother me too much at all, because it's something that's completely different, something we would not see in this particular city at this point. That's my reading of it. In any event, that's where we are.
Great. Well, I appreciate both of you giving us your opinion. And Eitan, you'd like to speak again?
I just want to say that in terms of the concurrence, Mr. Sadi, if you read, I know you read it, Justice Sotomayor's first paragraph where she says that she joined the court's resolution of the limited question, because you're right, it's a limited question because, again, each case when it goes for the Supreme Court is limited to the facts of that case, where it says the limited question presented is conditions on building permits, and it focuses on building permits. That's why I raised the issues, whether or not this decision applies in the non-building permit context. I don't know, I haven't read this enough and really scrutinized it, but that was a limited question the Supreme Court was answering in the permitting context. We make decisions all the time other than permitting context.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, another good point. Yeah, David.
Just for clarification, I want to say that any discussions I have with the city attorney doesn't mean he has made up his mind or has weighed in on this at all. So if someone here is thinking that the city attorney has weighed in and has given his opinion one way or the other, that is not the case at all.
Right, he's just saying that it's worthy of consideration.
And because the decision is brand new, it's only a month old, there's going to be some time where we're going to see how and if this applies, in other situations, obviously, across the country. So
right.
it's very early.
If this board, with whatever consult we get in terms of mandating certain percentage of affordable housing in different zones, or however we decide to do it, to address a portion of the affordability issues that we just heard about tonight, then the board will make their decision, and it will be in a regulation, and if Sheets ends up being applicable, then that'll be 10 years down the road before we hear anything about it. But anyway, so do you have a staff report tonight, David?
None this evening.
Okay. Well, with that, we're adjourned. And thank you all to all the board members.